Peace, commerce, and honest friendships with all nations, entangling alliances with none. Thomas Jefferson spoke these words at his presidential inauguration in 1801, over 200 years ago. But the meaning of his message remains true to this day. However, since 1948, when the United States first began to officially recognize Israel as a nation state, the two countries have had a very close relationship that has dramatically influenced American foreign policy. And even today in the 21st century, the Israeli and Palestinian conflict continues to rage on. Now, I think most of us in here would agree that we've been living in a rather turbulent time for America, from the recent financial crisis to the ongoing war against terrorism and the ever-increasing federal deficit. It's easy to see that the 21st century has not gotten off to the best start for the U.S. But what I'm advocating tonight is something I think could really help the situation. But it's also something that goes against decades of American foreign policy. Tonight, I'm advocating that the United States should quit sending military aid to Israel. Now, I think many of you in here might think to yourselves right now, well, isn't aid to Israel necessary to win the war on terror and to promote stability and democracy in the Middle East where we need it? And you might have even seen the article on CNN.com a few weeks ago about Vice President Joe Biden's visit to New Orleans, where he declared, quote, "I feel strongly that we should support Israel forever," end quote. However, I don't think this necessarily has to be the case. Tonight, I'd like to show you why supporting Israel with military aid is not in the best interest of the United States. First and foremost, it creates a direct threat to our national security. Secondly, it is not our responsibility as Americans. And thirdly, it's just not necessary due to the present capabilities of Israel. Now, while this military aid has had the right intentions of promoting democracy and creating stability in this Middle Eastern region like it's intended, these policies have actually had quite a bit of bad consequences for the United States. Just last September, Al-Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden released a message through his media network As-Sahab, where he declared, quote, "Let me say what we have said for more than 2.5 decades, that it is your support for your Israeli allies who are occupying the land of Palestine that have caused us to carry out the attacks of 9/11. You can look at that with what he's saying there is that America's presence in the Middle East has really antagonized a lot of Middle Easterners and created this terrorism that happened on 9/11. Patrick Buchanan, the senior advisor to several different White House administrations, in 2002 said for WorldNetDaily.com that, quote, "These Islamic killers are over here because we're over there. It's not that they dislike our domestic politics, it's that they detest our foreign politics." So this idea of non-interventionism in a foreign policy is not something that's new for the United States, but it's also something that's had these negative consequences abroad in the Middle East. Stephen Shalom, in his 2007 book, Perilous Power, wrote that the United States' presence in this region has created a bit of a shadow that has really prevented any true resolution from being worked out between the Israelis and the Palestinians. So I'd like to reiterate again that it is our support for Israel that has created this direct threat against our national security. Secondly, I think it's another reason that we should not support Israel is the fact that as Americans, it's not really our responsibility to give this aid to the Israelis. Ron Paul, a member of the House of Representatives, said in 2006 as a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, quote, "I don't really believe that our being involved in foreign affairs makes us any more secure as Americans. And I don't really believe that the Constitution really authorizes us to be the world's policeman, much less choose one side over another in a foreign conflict." And what he's saying there with that non-interventionism, it's not something that's really new for America. You can go back to President George Washington's farewell address in 1796, where he said, quote, "Europe has a set of primary interests which to us have none or a very remote relation, and hence she must be engaged in foreign controversies, the causes of which are essentially foreign to our concerns." And he went on to say that it is our true policy to steer clear of any permanent alliance with any part of the foreign world. And another reason that the United States should not send military to Israel is the fact that currently Israel is more than capable of defending itself. Jeremy Sharp, a Middle Eastern specialist, published a document this past September titled "U.S. Foreign Aid to Israel," where he really details the amount of aid that Israel has received from the United States. And since World War II, Israel has received the largest cumulative amount of military aid to any other nation. And from 1976 to 2004, Israel was the largest largest annual recipient of foreign aid. And since 1985, Israel has received on average $3 billion a year in this military funding. And if you think, with all the problems we have here in America domestically and our ever-increasing federal deficit, it's easy to see where this money could be better spent here in America. Now, historically, Israel has been shown to take care of itself. In 1981, when the Osirak nuclear reactor was being built, the Israelis responded quickly to the perceived threat and eliminated the reactor and then prevented any harm from being done to Israel. Now, Sharp goes on the right that America's increased military support for Israel has transformed the Israeli army into one of the most technologically advanced armies in the world. And he calls it what he said a military qualitative advantage over Israel's neighboring countries. So I hope tonight you have seen why supporting Israel with this military aid is not in the best interest of the United States. From the fact that it creates a direct threat to our country, to the idea that it is not our responsibility as Americans, and the fact that Israel today is more than capable of defending itself, I hope you've seen why this is not in the best interest of the U.S. So the next time you go to the voting booth or talk to your local congressman, remember the implications that this policy has on us today. Remember the Constitution, and remember no entangling alliances. Thank you.